very common misconception that just letting the forest go is the best way to do it. In a perfect world, yes. Old growth forests definitely have their place, specifically for different kinds of forest interior dwelling species. But if you're managing a large enough property, you should definitely have transitions of different kinds of habitats and different kinds of age classes.
Welcome, everybody, to the May version of Land and Wildlife Speaker Series. As always, it's an honor to be here with you guys and share this type of information with you. I love it. It's a passion of mine since I was a kid, and love bringing information to improve land management and wildlife and biodiversity on the landscape. I'm the Wildlife Management Specialist with the University of Maryland Extension. Today, I'm excited to introduce Chase Kolstrom. He's going to speak on sustainable forest management for wildlife. He is with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service. We're in the southern half of Maryland. He is going to be one of your guys to talk to about different types of Department of Agriculture programs that can help provide incentives and payments for different types of forest management practices. He's also super knowledgeable as well and helping to think about what you might want to do with your forest as you plan it out. He went to University of Tennessee, majored in forestry, and had a minor in wildlife and fisheries science. And honestly, I think University of Tennessee is one of the best programs in the country. They got some real standouts out there. So we're in good hands with a solid education and Chase's background. And then went on to work for the U.S. Forest Service at the Talladega National Forest with a timber crew. So he's got firsthand experience on doing timber work. And then he went on to the Maryland Forest Service, where he worked in Charles County, so before he landed in his current position with NRCS. So I want to start by also sharing a couple of links, and Chase will reiterate this as well. But if you're if you have forest land and you do not have a forest management plan, or you haven't really done much with it lately, probably I would recommend the first place to go is to contact the Maryland Forest Service, and they have county offices that you would reach out to. And that's a great place to start because they will work for a nominal fee, between $200 and $300, $250, $300, and create a forest management plan for your property. This is a key document that not only gets you property tax benefits, but it will also lay the groundwork for participating in these NRCS programs. So it's an important document to have on hand. And it can be, I look at these as living documents. They can be updated. And as you learn more, you can adjust them and develop them from there. So I'm going to put the link to the Maryland Forest Service contact page in the chat. And it's a great place to start. So, and then from there, you might want to think about, well, what can I do with my timber? If I want to do a timber harvest, can I have income from that? The next step for that would probably be working with a consulting forester. There's a consulting directory that the University of Maryland Extension holds, and we have a whole list of all the accredited foresters in the state, and you can go through that and find people who work in your area and have them come out and look and start to think about what you could actually do in terms of the actual implementation. So those are the sort of private side. These guys can also do forest management plans. It's going to be a lot more expensive than if you work with the Maryland Forest Service to the context I shared earlier. So these are the people you work with actually doing the stuff on the ground and like selling timber or actually setting up loggers and all that stuff. So with that, I will say thank you again for joining. I hope this is a good experience. Look forward to your feedback. And I'm going to stop my share and let Chase bring up his screen.
Cool. Well, again, thank you, Luke, for the introduction. I'm just going to kind of hit a lot of the high notes for a lot of these forestry practices. I mean, there's a lot to this, but for today, it's only like an hour or less than that to go over a lot of this stuff. So just brush the surface and kind of get some ideas in everyone's head. If you're a landowner who's interested for just wildlife for recreation, or you're a hunter, or just want to manage your property well, just some things you can do. And like what Luke was alluding to with like being in touch with a forester, I think that's a good first step. Just for, even if you don't need a FMP or forest management plan for tax reasons, it's good to have one if you have any interest in doing this stuff, because it's like your initial guidance, right? And it's usually a 15-year plan. And then, once the 15 years is up, you kind of reassess it and think what's to come next. So definitely, formulate that relationship with your forester, whether you're working with a private forester from the start or DNR forester, or some cases I'm folks primary forester. Whoever you're working with, just formulate that relationship. You have them on speed dial. Look to them for guidance through any of this stuff. So just to start, we'll see who sustainable forestry benefits. First, obviously, wildlife. This little chunky squirrel here. He looks like he's been enjoying a lot of acorns and other hard mast. Hard mast, soft mast is basically the nut or fruit that comes from a tree, MAST. Hard mast producer would be like oaks, hickories, walnuts, pecans, stuff like that. Soft mast would be like your persimmon, mulberry, fleshy fruit, stuff like that. So there's a lot of forage potential for wildlife. But with that, hand in hand, timber production and recreation, human needs go right in hand with, a healthy forest system and healthy forest ecology. So if you're doing all your things right, you're going to have pretty much these three pillars firing on all cylinders. You have, great wildlife habitat, great recreational opportunities, and you'll set up a pretty healthy timber rotation as well. So what does it all mean? So applying silvicultural practices to establish or restore healthy forest ecology. Duh, right? So what is silviculture? Silviculture is basically the art and science of manipulating forest stand to get your desired outcome. So again, these three pillars of wildlife, timber, recreation. So introducing different disturbances to get your desired outcome, to alter the species composition. And like I said, it's an art and a science. You'll hear a lot of people say that because there's no really like one size fits all approach. Each stand is different. If it's a property you're just purchasing, you don't have a lot of information on it. You have no idea what kind of management was done on it previously. So there's a lot of different factors to it. Soils is going to matter a lot as well. Invasive species presence. There's no one size fits all approach to this kind of stuff. Why introducing disturbance is important. So replicates natural disasters or disturbances that would typically shape the landscape or going to create mosaics. Like wildfires are one that take human infrastructure out of the equation for a little bit here. Imagine, no humans on the landscape, like a wildfire would rip through from a lightning strike and, could burn off several hundred, if not 1,000 acres, not just out in Western United States, but even on the East Coast here. And that can kind of serve as like a reset for a lot of different vegetation, provide a whole slew of different habitats and age classes of succession that are so vital for different kinds of species. I don't know where we kind of fell along the lines of, I guess preservation would be the word, but like not doing anything with as far as forest management, like the very common misconception that just letting the forest go is the best way to do it. In a perfect world, yes, but like a lot of times old growth forests become very stagnant, very susceptible to disease and pests. They often have closed canopy, so you're really not getting a lot of the valuable regeneration that you would with different disturbances being introduced. Old growth forests definitely have their place, specifically for different kinds of forest interior dwelling species. But if you're managing a large enough property, you should definitely have transitions of different kinds of habitats and different kinds of age classes. Just some definitions that you'll probably hear me say throughout this talk today on stand. Think of it as like an individual management unit. So if it's a large enough property, oftentimes your forester you're working with will divide it up into several different stands. You can have one, you could have 10 different stands. It's kind of limitless, just depending on the species composition in that area, the soils, the age class, what kind of management was in there previously. They're just different management units. Easy as that. Even age stands, so you have one identifiable age class that's consistent or predominant. Uneven age stand is no consistent age class, or you have more than one a predominant age class. Stocking is basically the measure of stand density for standing timber within your stand. And then basal area is going to be your cross-sectional square footage occupied by standing timber within your stand. So imagine if you clear cut a forest and then you measure the diameter across like the cross-sectional square footage of those stumps, that would be your basal area. And there's some ways to kind of alter basal area, or reduce stocking to get your desired regeneration or whatever kind of management you're doing for your desired outcome. Forest stand improvement is a kind of over-encompassing way of saying that. So you're removing the undesired stock within your stand or undesired species, gives more growing room to your desired species, allows more penetration of sunlight to hit the forest floor, to promote regeneration of not only your desired tree species but different kinds of grasses and wildflowers too, that are good cover for wildlife and also good forage. It also gives obviously growing room for your desired stock, and it really helps in a pre-commercial setting kind of get the ball rolling as far as the gauging towards more valuable timber, more beneficial wildlife standing trees. It's like an over-encompassing way of that. And there's many different methods of forest stand improvement. We'll go over a couple today to kind of meet some different outcomes here. So let's go into like my favorite one, not my favorite one, but the one I use a lot. It's called crop tree release. This one's pretty good. It's like easy for people to wrap their mind around. You're more so looking at individual trees within your stand. So your hard mass producers that not only are beneficial for wildlife but will be good timber in the future. So you're relieving them of competition by cutting the least desired species around them. So when I talk about less desirable species, I'm referring to the ones that grow a lot quicker. They really don't serve purpose as far as timber or wildlife food, like your sweet gum, your black gum, red maple. Red maple can be valuable timber in some cases, but oftentimes it's kind of just outcompetes your oaks and hickories and stuff like that you're managing for. So by relieving competition around these specific, quote unquote future crop trees, you're just ensuring that they grow taller, straighter, and they develop a fuller crown because they have more room to grow in the canopy, less competition for growing space, and they're going to produce a lot more acorns for you, or if it's an oak, obviously, but or hard mass, whatever species it is. So here's a little diagram of it. So in green here, you have your potential future crop tree. For this example, we'll just say this is a red oak, white oak, northern red oak. And then around it, you see it's very crowded in this canopy. You have some codominant stuff. You have some larger trees here. Hope you all can see my cursor all right. It's very crowded. Definitely going to be competing for resources. Some of these might be desirable species. Some of them might be just like less desirable. It's kind of the point of crop tree release is to free it on all sides, so it can develop a fuller crown and also grow taller, straighter. Just be a better tree for you in the future. Most of the time, like when I mark crop tree release for people, I'm out there with a paint can, I'm marking a lot of, it's mostly pre-commercial work that I do. But this, if there is valuable timber in here that's competing, that can be harvested. It's all just dependent. So there's a couple of different ways that crop tree release can be achieved. As long as it's being relieved on at least 3 sides. The studies show that 2-side release or 1-side release are far less effective. 3 to 4 is ideal. So it might be like by being 4-sided. Imagine this in like jumped ahead a little bit, like a grid here, 4 ways, and this is 1 side, this is 1 side, 3rd side, 4th side. By releasing on 4 sides, it has optimal growing rate. But yeah, if it does have merchantable timber in here that is competing, you can't harvest it. Just keep in mind that with any operation like that, you can do some residual damage because these trees are falling. There's equipment in here. You could end up damaging your crop tree, or it could be fine. But either way, it can be achieved through commercial or non-commercial. So this is like a more of a vertical look at it. So you have your crop tree, and obviously you're removing the competing trees here. And then hopefully, like I said, this develops a fuller crown. In this little diagram, it has these trees underneath, kind of codominant understory or mid-story trees. Depending on what they are, you can remove those too. You definitely don't want to make too much canopy opening, but just enough where it has ample growing room where it's not touching at the canopy. And to the right here, you can see this is a study. These were 2 northern red oaks that were released. See, it's not touching canopy with any of these trees around it, so it's going to have a lot more room to grow, and it's not going to be competing for sunlight and other resources too. So yeah, crop tree lease, it's relatively simple to wrap your head around, but I use it a lot. So it's a good place to start if you have a younger stand, or say you have some crowded overstory with some co-dominant desirable species present. Snagged entry creation. This is great, like vertical habitat for different kinds of forest interior dwelling species. So think like your woodpeckers, different kinds of songbirds. Bats are awesome. I love bats. Great for insect control. All kinds of different forest mammals can roost up in here, or create cavity nest up in here. There's a lot of different ways to create den trees. As long as the tree is standing dead and not like actively growing and competing for resources, the trees around it that are trying to grow for resources or grow and prosper, they're not going to pay any mind to it. So don't worry about just leaving it dead standing. That's completely fine. We'll get in some ways how to create a snag tree. Depending on your comfortability with a chainsaw or herbicide, it's going to depend on how you achieve this. But with a chainsaw here, it's called girdling a tree. So you're severing off this outer layer of the tree called the cambium layer, the outer couple inches, depending on the diameter of the tree. Cambium layer contains the xylem and phloem, which carries nutrients and sugars that are created during photosynthesis from the leaves down to the trunk and the roots, and then carbohydrates and water from the roots of the tree up into the stem of the tree. So you're severing that, not allowing for nutrient exchange, and then obviously the tree will hopefully die, and then be a snag tree for years to come. Definitely don't want to do this near like any structure or road. This would be more in the interior of your forest, but it's great vertical habitat. When you're girdling a tree, it's definitely good to do like 2 passes here. So just in case you miss a little spot, I mean, it's really hard to be consistent with using a chainsaw. If anyone's ever tried this, it's a lot harder than it seems to completely evenly sever it around the stem of this tree or the trunk. So 2 passes is good, because if there's any little bit, because these are vertical channels that go up and down throughout the trunk of this tree, if there's any kind of channels that are left without being severed, then I mean it could carry on for a little bit. Oftentimes it will leaves it open for insect and disease to get in here, and it will eventually die, but it definitely could heal up, and you can make it through this. So make sure you sever it completely. And also you can apply herbicide to this as well. I'll talk a little bit more about herbicide application with the hack and squirt method, but you can definitely apply herbicide to these wounds. Typically we want to do it like right before the tree goes dormant, so not during the growing season, because those trees pushing sap during the growing season, it's gonna the herbicide's not going to take as much, and it could push a lot of it out of the tree. So it's just kind of a waste of money, because herbicide gets a little pricey. Also save you some time too. The hack and squirt method over here, so a little bit simpler, might go a little bit quicker for you too. All you need is a hatchet and a little bottle of herbicide here, or a backpack sprayer, however you want to carry your herbicide around. Typically like a glyphosate base will be fine. So to apply that same time, like right before leaf off, right before dormancy. But you make a 45-degree hatch right in the tree, so this is kind of perfect. Then you apply the herbicide to it. The amount of hatches that are going to go into the tree is going to depend on the diameter of the tree. So like this little tree here is probably he's probably doing 4 passes around, but obviously a larger tree is going to take a lot more to kill it successfully. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, now we're going to get into some regeneration methods here. So this is a pretty cool one. Shelter wood, it's a regeneration method that's set to establish a 2-age or even age stand. Basically, you're reducing the basal area significantly enough where it creates like this open stand structure. This isn't the best picture in the world. This is like some pine, probably down the deep south somewhere, longleaf or loblolly pine, but it's relatively open. There's a lot of canopy openings, very sparsely spaced trees, probably basal area like 40 to 60 basal area. Gives a lot of potential for regeneration, and also a lot of potential. You can introduce like different disturbances like prescribed fire if you want to manage for like a kind of a savanna understory. That's really good for quail habitat for you folks out on the shore that still have quail. But there's a lot of different things you can do with shelter wood, and I'll get into here. This is just a little kind of diagram of the nuts and bolts of shelter wood. So you have your mature stand here, and then you're going to do your first establishment cut. So you're going to remove, obviously reduce the basal area to your desired amount. You're going to leave, obviously, the desired species you want left over, sparsely spaced out with your establishment cut. And then here you have a couple options you can go. So in this case, you're creating like a 2-age system. So you have your overstory, and then you have your next generation of regen here. Typically, it's going to be very close to whatever's been contributing to the seed bed left in the establishment cut. But you can also introduce like pretty consistent prescribed fire and create that like on a savanna or like a grassland habitat with different kinds of wildflowers too that need fire to germinate. But in this example, they're just doing regen, and then they do a removal cut, and then it trends back towards a mature stand. But there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. Definitely consult with the forester that you're working with to kind of, whatever species you're managing for, what your timeline is too is very important, because, this isn't like traditional agriculture or any kind of other land management. I mean, trees take a long time to grow, obviously, so keep that in mind as well. Just an overview of shelter wood from the top. So see your uncut stand, the establishment cut, your removal cut with your regeneration, and then kind of back to square one again. So yeah, shelter wood's kind of neat. We'll get into some other regeneration methods here in a second, but there's a really cool project NRCS is working on with shelter wood in Charles County for quail and turkey habitat. It's really a big, cool thing to be a part of. The regeneration cut here, or clear cut, believe it or not, this is a lot better than a lot of other methods of timber harvesting. You might hear the term high grade or a diameter limit cut. That's where you basically remove anything of value from the stand, of whether it's desired species or just, desired age class. Remove all that from the stand, and what's left is kind of like, for lack of a better term, just junk. Typically of less desired species like your red maples and sweet gums and stuff like that, or Virginia pine. And that's what's left to kind of carry on. So that's what's already established in the, so you do high grade, what's already established in the overstory is just junk trees. And then what's going to regen from that is, you might have some desired species in there, but it's a lot harder to manage from that point, as opposed to a regeneration cut, which is you're just starting from scratch, cutting everything. And then from that point, you can kind of manage depending on what comes up, and introduce different disturbances like, prescribed fire, if you want to keep like an early successional habitat, or if you want to manage for like, a shelter wood in the future, or just let it grow up and then maybe introduce like crop tree release or anything like that. You'll be in good shape there. But it's a good start from scratch moment. So if it's like, oftentimes I'll come across a stand that have been subject to high grading for years, and it's just like really just not good timber, very limited wildlife potential. More often than not, if it's like a flat slope like this, a clear cut will be in the landowner's best interest. So just kind of a start from scratch opportunity there. Then you can manage it depending on obviously their timeline. This is pretty cut and dry. You have your mature stand, you clear cut it, and then you let establishment happen. Then as it trends towards a mature stand again, then this is where you could introduce like crop tree release, or, if you want to create that open stand structure, you can try a shelter wood as it gets closer to being mature, like fully mature. But like I said, this is just starting from scratch and then kind of seeing what kind of management is to follow from this. So pretty simple. But yeah, high grades are, I'll just go back to that for a second. It's an unfortunate part about the industry, but it's definitely part of it. And you see a lot of them, especially down in Southern Maryland and probably sure other parts of the state too, where all the valuable timber that's taken off the stand. And then what's left is just junk, really. So this is definitely a better way of approaching that. It's better to leave nothing than that junk left over to keep contributing to the seedbed and already be, dominant in the overstory at that point. So just keep that in mind. This is another regeneration method. It's kind of like the between shelter wood and a regeneration cut. So seed tree method. So it's similar to shelter wood, except the trees you're leaving are much more sparsely spaced out. So it might only be like a couple of trees an acre that you're leaving, but you're kind of same thing. You're creating like a 2-age or even age stand. So you have a mature stand of trees here. You do your first cut, so you're leaving these seed trees at however many an acre of, these are going to be your desired species that you want to manage for. So whether it's, pine you're managing in, or if it's mixed hardwoods with some pine or just mixed hardwoods, you're going to leave these desired species that you want to come up next, that you want to regen as seed trees to keep contributing to the seed bank here. So after you have your seed trees established, you're going to get some regen. Then you can do an establishment cut, or you already have your establishment cut, but then you do a removal cut if you'd like, or you can just leave them there. Then hopefully your regen is of your desired species, and it's going to start trending back towards a mature stand. And obviously you'll get back towards your, what other kind of management you want to do. So whether it's some kind of TSI work or crop to release, whatever it is. And when I say forest stand improvement or timber stand improvement, those are interchangeable. I forgot to mention that from the start when we were at that slide, but for NRCS standards and specs, you'll hear forest stand improvement. It's just the way they call it. But then if you're working with a private consulting forester or your state county forester, they'll probably often refer to it as timber stand improvement or TSI, but they're interchangeable. They're the exact same thing. It's just NRCS calls it something different. And then we'll get into some different mosaics of habitat here. So patch openings are a really good one, especially if you have large swaths of land, like say, several dozen acres or 100 acres or more. It's definitely good to break that up. You don't want just contiguous old growth forest. So patch openings are a great change of pace for that. So I think this was taken at British Columbia. So this is up in Canada. It's going to obviously vary due to your location, but the concept remains. So they're creating a patch opening here. It could be, as small as a 1/4 acre in size, or it can be as large as 10 acres, just depending on the size of your overall woodland. So they just clear cut an area here. They left a couple trees, kind of residual, but they clear cut an area, and then you can see this is a picture 5 years later, the regeneration that's come up, and see all the kind of like scrubby shrubs and trees that kind of establish here after the fact. I mean, this is like really good cover habitat, not only for like your larger animals or your game animals like deer, but also like different upland birds really benefit a lot from this habitat for nesting, for cover, escape cover, just for raising young, kind of all those things. So it's definitely good to transition your habitats from, mature forest, have some patch openings, maybe, or small clear cuts, whatever terminology you want to use, kind of create that different mosaic. And they can also mix in some different kind of disturbances like prescribed fire as well, which I'll get into here in a minute. But yeah, patch openings are awesome. Definitely recommend them. You can also, like I see a lot, like deer hunters will make a patch opening and then pull the stumps up and plant like clover or some kind of forage for wildlife. That's fine too. But this kind of habitat is very vital. This kind of like early successional habitat, not only for like your upland birds, but all species really. Edge feathering. This is really good, especially in like agricultural communities where that kind of transitional habitat is kind of really been taken away from the landscape. A feathered edge is you're trying to avoid what's called a hard edge. And let me skip forward just for a second here. So this is what I mean when I call a hard edge. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an ag field. It could be just any kind of open field, fallow field, pasture, whatever it is. In this case, looks like some kind of row crop. And there's no transition from the row crop to field edge to forest. So this kind of like robs a lot of species of escape cover. Think about if you were a prey animal, would you really want to just walk out of the forest into an open area. You kind of want like that transition to kind of fly under the radar a little bit. So keep that in mind with any kind of species that you're managing for, whether it's, quail is a big one on the shore. Edge feathering is probably a big thing over there. Even deer love this kind of stuff. I'll get into that in a little bit here in a second, but this is a really good example of this diagram. It can be done in a lot of different ways, but here you see the crop field, say this is corn, and then you have your mature forest back towards the bottom here. Looks like what they did here was they clear cut a little strip, maybe 15 to 20 feet. They let this natural regenerate. So different kinds of trees and shrubs regenerated. So it has like a ladder effect. And then maybe up more towards the crop field, they planted like some pollinator habitat. So thinking if you're like a little quail running through these corn stalks, picking or eating some corn that have dropped to the floor here, you can quickly escape from a fox or a coyote or any kind of predator right into this kind of pollinator habitat, and then you can escape into this early successional forest, and then you have your mature forest too. So just keep those things in mind when you're managing for these small game species, especially like your quail, rabbits, turkey, different kinds of upland birds. Edge feathering is really cool. So let's show some examples of that. So this isn't the best example, but it's just another thing you can do that I've had people do as well, where you fell trees into the field. So this isn't a crop field. It's just like maybe some pollinator habitat or just unmowed grass. So you're just felling some trees, kind of creating like these different funnels from the forest. So then you're letting stuff kind of grow up around these dead trees. So different kinds of trees and shrubs that'll grow within this, hopefully like native stuff. Oftentimes, like this is probably like honeysuckle or something that you don't want, but in a perfect world, this isn't like native shrubbery that's going to grow up in this and kind of create that transition habitat as well in these natural channels. You can even funnel deer like using this kind of stuff if you fell enough trees in the right direction. Like leaving an ag field, you can kind of create like a natural funnel for deer and turkey and all kinds of other wildlife. Here's another example. So these fellows are talking about edge feathering, I'm sure, but you have your mature forest back here. Then where they're standing, it looks like something they probably mow, I don't know, every couple weeks or every month or so. And then between that and the forest, you have something that probably they either never mow or mow once a year, or maybe they even burn it. But it's they kind of let it grow up a little bit, and it kind of creates that transition, kind of like steps. So you have your short grass, tall grass, and then into forest there. So just another example of edge feathering. There's a couple of different ways to do it. You could work with your forester to kind of achieve this, or a wildlife biologist, depending on the kind of species you're managing for. Or if you're just doing like an overall encompassing kind of edge feathering, then just pick whatever is best for you. If you're someone who actively farms, you probably don't want to lose 15 to 30 feet of production, so keep that in mind. Or if you lease your property for ag production, definitely communicate that with whoever you're leasing for crops, because you will lose a little bit of at least 20 to 30 feet of production there. But it's just all depending on what desired outcome you want. Kind of avoid that hard edge. Then we'll get into some prescribed burning here. So when I was talking about like different kinds of natural disturbances that would happen, obviously I've mentioned before that in a natural landscape, we avoid of human infrastructure, lightning would strike and kind of firewood rip through the landscape, kind of kill off a lot of your less desired trees, sick trees, rip through grassland habitat, kind of serve as like a reset for all that. So fire is a great tool for resetting habitat. A lot of different species rely on fire for germination, like different kinds of grasses and wildflowers rely heavily on fire for germination. Different kinds of tree species actually rely on it for kind of batting down competition. So like your mature oaks and stuff are a lot more like fire resilient. And they rely on fire to kind of suppress a lot of your less desired trees that typically grow a lot faster than oaks. Oaks are, they're like the tortoise and the hare here. So They're the tortoise part of this equation, but they take a lot longer to grow, and they're much more reliant on natural disturbances like fire to kind of reach their full potential, if you will. Definitely, if you want to introduce prescribed fire, which I recommend, definitely consult with like the Maryland DNR Forest Service. Like, definitely don't just buy a drip torch and go, burning your woods on your own. You create a whole slew of problems that way, or burning grasslands or anything like that. Definitely consult with somebody. Don't just go take it out on your own accord. But Forest Service, they even offer this as a service for prescribed burning on private land. So if you have a relationship already with your DNR forester, just bring it up if that's a avenue you want to explore. All right. Here's a natural fire cycle. This is a very over encompassing fire cycle picture here. So it probably is kind of more with the idea of a Western landscape, but same principle applies. Say if your forest here, fire rips through it, it's going to kill off a lot of your less fire resilient trees or sick trees or whatever the case is. Might create some snags for you. This allows a lot more sunlight to penetrate, a lot more regeneration here. So it's just a natural disturbance that kind of does a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about for you. In a natural landscape, this is what fire does for the overall ecology of the forest. Like I said, I'm just very broadly going over. I mean, a lot of this stuff is a lot more complex, obviously, but this is a quick synopsis of how fire helps here. But this is some more prescribed burning examples here. So this was down in Alabama, I believe. This is the same property. 4 different snapshots here. So in Exhibit A, if you will, this was, I think, never burned. So this is like a pine mixed hardwood stand, predominantly pine, probably. Looks like, yeah, by the other pictures here. So pine mixed hardwoods. It was never burned. So you really don't have a whole lot of diversity as far as the grass and this forest floor species coming in. Exhibit B here, I think, was burned once every 4 or 5 years. So you do have a lot more regeneration of different kinds of grasses, maybe some forbs and other cool stuff. That's a lot, creates that like savanna-y vibe here. And then in this bottom left-hand corner, this is Exhibit C. They burn this, I think, every other year or every 3rd year. A lot thicker as far as this grass understory goes. This is kind of like that pine savanna habitat I was talking about. It's really cool. This is really cool for like turkeys and quail and stuff. And then Exhibit D over here, this was burned, I think, every year. So you can see how thick that understory of grasses is. I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to burn it every year, but to introduce a fire cycle, if you're comfortable with that and you're interested in that, a rotation of fire is can do you a lot of good when it comes to creating different kinds of habitats on your property. So just keep that in mind. Lastly here, I really hate talking about invasive species because they just suck, but it's something to keep in mind when you're doing any of this management, because you're managing for the desired species that are beneficial for wildlife, and you're introducing disturbances that are going to benefit them. But a lot of time, I mean, if invasive species are present, whatever benefits the native population is going to benefit, a lot of these invasives as well. So control of these invasive species, or at least some suppression of them, is an absolute must. This is kudzu. I don't know if you guys are familiar with kudzu. This is down in the deep south somewhere, or the Carolinas, but we're at the most northern range of kudzu. So, but this can happen in Maryland, so just keep that in mind. And from this point, I don't know what you do. Kudzu is apparently pretty nutritious to goats and sheep. I've heard that from like 2 people, so don't quote me on that, but just something to keep in mind if you have livestock that would be willing to eat this kind of stuff. They call that biological control of invasive. So just one method there. And I'm not going to go into like methods of control, just introducing a couple, just something to think about whenever you're doing this stuff, because it just stinks that we have to talk about invasive species control, but they're here, and definitely something to keep in mind. We don't want to help spread them by the disturbances we're introducing. So yeah, you definitely have to fight these guys back too, in most cases. unless you're lucky, you don't have any. So these are a couple. I missed a couple on this page that I was going to put, like English ivy should be on here. But like multiflora rose is a shrub. Looks like a traditional rose bush, very similar. Domestic rose bush. Your Japanese honeysuckle is a vine that's going to kind of take over a field edge. That's a pain in the butt. Asiatic bittersweet or Oriental bittersweet. This can like completely engulf a tree. Or sometimes if you're driving around like Southern Maryland, I see a lot like old tobacco barns that are just engulfed in Oriental bittersweet, and it's just awful stuff. It's characterized by its little bittersweet berry here. It'll be red in the wintertime. This little yellowish casing will pop and there'll be a little red berry inside, but it's just awful stuff. Mile a minute, same thing. A lot of these things occur on field edges where they get the most sunlight, but they can engulf a tree. Mile a minute's kind of a pain in the butt as well. Japanese barberry, this is not fun to walk through, just like a multiflora rose. It is just some nasty barbs on this stuff. So I'm sure you'll want to remove this stuff anyway if you're a hunter out there walking around the woods. And then Japanese knotweed is another one that's a real nuisance. So I'm just going over a couple of these quick ones just so you're familiar. Wisteria, it's characterized by its really beautiful, if you want to call it beautiful, purple flower here. You'll see it like probably about a month or so ago. These guys were in full bloom. If you're driving down the highway, I'm sure you ran across some wisteria. Just nasty stuff. If you're ever driving with someone in the car and they mention how pretty the flowers are, definitely educate them on how harmful wisteria can be, because I drive around with my fiance a lot and she always mentions how pretty the flowers are. And oh man, if only she knew how devastating this stuff could be. So Tree of Heaven, this is like the worst. This was introduced, I think, in like the 1840s and with a lot of, like during the gold rush. I heard this one place, but it was planted a lot in like cities because it was very resilient to air pollution. So people planted it as like an ornamental, but it kind of just took off from there. Just a nasty tree. It's characterized, if you break the stem here and it smells like burnt peanut butter, that's a good indicator. And you'll know what burnt peanut butter smells like by just, if you smell it, you'll know. It's a very unique scent. But it kind of looks like early on, it looks like a black walnut. I could see it get confused by the shape of the leaves, but typically it has like this reddish hue on the leaves. And its bark is very distinct as well. Like there's very distinct stretch marks on it. And it is host for the spotted lanternfly, which is just, I'm sure a lot of people listening today have at least heard of the spotted lanternfly and the damage it can do to not only trees, but all kinds of different vegetation. So definitely get rid of this stuff if you can. Tree of Heaven, I'll talk a little bit on removing this. Just cutting it down will not kill it. Definitely use herbicide for this, whether you're just hacking, squirting it, or cutting it down and spraying the stump, because it will just stump sprout and keep coming back and probably make it a lot worse for you. So definitely use herbicide to control this stuff. Yes. Right here. Please don't. Yeah. And it grows so fast too. That's another thing. Like one year you'll notice it, and then the next year it's 8 feet higher. That's a good indicator that's Tree of Heaven. Just a really, really bad species to have. So definitely recommend controlling this one. If you see these little guys, definitely squash them because they're not good. Japanese silkgrass is like the bane of my existence. Any kind of low, cool, wet areas in the forest, it will just grow prolifically. It's really hard to control. I have one client of mine controlling it in Anne Arundel County right now, and he cut it before it seeded out, and then he sprayed, and it seems to be working pretty well. But it will just blanket the forest floor. Like I said, especially in cool, shady areas, wet areas, it will just take over the forest floor. So if you see this stuff, it's almost like a neon-y green, very bright. It'll stand, once you see it for the first time, it'll stand out to you. But if you just look at it, I mean, not much regeneration can happen in this. Not much native grasses, really nothing's going to compete with this. So control of this is very, Um, very, very important. If it's present. A lot of times this gets transferred from like forest to forest through like say there's a timber operation and like the seed was stuck in like the skidder tracks of any kind of logging equipment. That could get transferred that way, or just from animals too, or you walking through the woods. So just keep that in mind too when you're leaving one property and going to another, or bringing stuff back to your home property. Definitely, like, even if it's just like taking the air compressor and spraying off your Carhartt pants or your jeans or whatever, or ideally you change your clothes or wash them, just because you don't know what kind of seed spread. You can see how small these are. Grasses especially. I mean, they'll just latch onto your shoelaces, anything. And then it's like gone to the races after that. So kind of wrapping up here, just some cost share financial incentive programs that are available in Maryland. You have your Woodlands Incentives Program. So this is through DNR. So talk to your DNR forester. It's like straightforward cost share. It's a little simpler than the federal programs. But all you need is for all of these programs, you need a forest management plan to be eligible for these. But the Woodlands Incentives Program is a great avenue to take if you're already working with your DNR forester. And some of them are aware of the federal programs, so like EQIP, or Environmental Quality Incentives Program through NRCS, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. It's applicable to, I use it for forestry, obviously, as a forester, but it's applicable for pasture, crop, all that stuff. So these are the main two programs I deal with a lot, working in partnership with NRCS. So just click on those programs. So references. I think Luke's going to post the slides, so you can look up some of these articles I pulled from for some of this stuff. My contact info here. Like I said, I work over all Southern Maryland, so I'm rarely in one county. I live in Calvert County, so I'm in the Calvert Soil Conservation District mostly day to day, but I could be on a site visit in any of the other 4 counties. So the mobile is the best way to get a hold of me. And then my email, obviously, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Chase.Kolstrom at USDA.gov. If you're interested in any kind of federal cost share, say you just, need help getting in touch with NRCS in another county, or help getting in touch with a private consulting forester or DNR forester, you can just shoot me a call or a text or email, and I can see how I can help you out. And that's all I got for you guys. I was trying to leave some time so we had time for questions here. I might have ran over a little bit, Luke. Sorry. Yep.
Great. So we had a lot of good questions coming through here. First off, does NRCS work with public county parklands as well, or any public lands? And I want to say it's probably a no. I think you guys' programs are reserved for private lands, but I wanted to let you chime in with anything additional on that.
Eligibility is going to vary. I think in some cases it can. And most of the time I don't really make that, just like, I'm not the one sifting through the eligibility. Definitely reach out to like your local NRCS office, but there are cases where I think we do help on some public land, either whether it be county or state land, for cost share stuff. So I think there is potential for eligibility. Just, sort that through with your local NRCS office. The district conservationist will be able to answer that question.
Bob had asked about whether we could cover crop tree release by girdling versus dropping the competing tree. I think you covered girdling pretty well. I don't know if you covered dropping it as much. Do you want to maybe talk about some of the pros and cons of whether you just fell a tree versus girdling it? And I'll also share my experience. I girdled a tree to do exactly this, some crop tree release. And it was actually an understory tree that was at the base of a white oak that just a stately white oak I wanted to give a hand out to. And I was expecting it to not sprout this spring because I did a solid girdle. And it was my understanding it was the outer ring of the tree where they, get nutrients up and down. I learned that the sapwood, which is quite a bit deeper into the wood, actually transports water up. And it's the outer layer of the cambium which is bringing nutrients back down to the roots. So it's actually, it can still be getting water if you don't get all the way through the sapwood, which can be several inches deep. And so even though I went 2 to 3 inches deep on it, it still looks fine. So it's a process that will take, I think, months, maybe years before that tree finally sort of dies from lack of nutrients coming back down to the roots. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, also pick and choose which trees you're girdling to. Like if it's hollow in the middle, you're just going to create a hazard for yourself. So definitely don't, be careful of that. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of times where people girdle poplar and it just heals up right away. I mean, within months, it's starting to, you know, send cells down there to kind of heal up those wounds, and it's within a year, it's fine again. Obviously, it's susceptible to disease and stuff and different kinds of pests, but girdling with, if you're comfortable using herbicide, is very effective. Or just make sure you have some clean cuts and you're severing all the outer cambium layer. So at least not the water might be exchanging still, but at least like different kinds of sugars and carbohydrates aren't exchanging up and down the tree. That's the most successful way to do it. And you'll do it a lot wrong before you do it right. So it's really hard. There's definitely a art to it. As far as like through the crop tree release, I meant to cover that and I'm sorry. So as long as those trees are dead and not competing for resources, it's whatever you as a landowner works best for you. So if it's merchantable timber, you want to haul it off for money, that's awesome. If you just want to leave them dead standing as snags, they're no longer competing for resources or canopy space, that's fine too. If you want to cut them down just for, aesthetically it looks better to you, that's perfectly fine. Or hinge cut them and that little sap suckers come off of them, that's fine as well. As long as there's nothing competing in that canopy, that is totally fine. There's really no advantage or disadvantage either way, just whatever aesthetically is better for you or easier for you, depending on the equipment or what you have on hand.
Right. Tom asked, do less desirable trees like gums, maples, red maples make good snags? And I'll take crack. I think yes. I know I have some maples that are even alive but diseased and have some cavities in them. And I think, but he added, safe, attractive to wildlife fairly quickly. I would say they're probably definitely attractive to wildlife. Safety is something to definitely consider. And you mentioned this in your presentation that you don't want to do it somewhere where you're going to be spending a lot of time or walking. Somebody's going to be underneath that because it is a hazard for falling limbs or branches and eventually the trunk after a long time.
Exactly. Just the target species for snags are the stuff that serves you no good. So it's not going to be good timber for you, and it's also not going to produce any kind of hard or soft mast. All it is taking up space in your forest. It's contributing to an overstock stand and just competing for your desired species that you're managing for. So get rid of them.
Yeah. Bob also asked you, what's the best method or what type of cut is best to regenerate white oak? And it's my experience, it seems like white oak's like a bit of an intermediate shade tolerance. Like I do not find seedlings coming up in heavily shaded areas at all. I'll find beeches and some tulip poplars, but very beech heavy in terms of shade tolerance. But I do find oaks coming in when I have partial shade, and they might not be the best in fully open clear cuts, but maybe they still do pretty well there. Could you elaborate how would you maybe think about getting more white oaks?
It depends on the stand. So if you're starting from, like, if you need to do a regen cut, so like your stand is mostly like there's a handful of oaks or desired species in there, but most of it is your gum and maybe poplar if you have some kind of valuable tree in there, or maple. You might want to, if it's a younger stand, you might want to think about just doing crop to release, so not really promoting a ton of regeneration, but more so just helping the stock that's in there. And hopefully those trees, over their lifetime produce a lot more nuts and kind of contribute to that seed bed a little bit. And then from a couple of years down the line, maybe you thin things a lot more heavily, produce more regeneration, a lot more sunlight. But in the short, if it's like a younger stand, there's kind of a long way to go till it's fully mature. I would start with crop to release. If it's a mature stand with like no white oak and you're trying to promote more, I would maybe consider a patch opening or a clear cut, honestly, just to kind of start from scratch and then kind of see what comes up. And then from there, you can get into your more intensive, like different kinds of timber stand improvement or crop to release or whatever not, or introducing prescribed fire even. Hope that kind of helps answer a little bit, but that kind of goes back to the no one size fits all approach. It's definitely going to be dependent on what's there, what your soil is going to allow to grow, what kind of invasives are present. There's a whole slew of different variables in this equation, so keep that in mind.
President obviously might need to be planting.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, with clear cut too. I mean, I fall on the fence of natural regeneration is typically better, so clear cut and then let natural regeneration. But in some cases, you might just need to replant. DNR has a ton of different planting programs, several of them. to get trees at very discounted. So it might just be in your best interest just to cut it, plant within the you can burn the slash and then replant within the slash. Or I really don't like pulling stumps up because that runs into like some soil erosion issues, but in some cases that might be okay. I prefer just to leave the stumps, especially if there's any kind of slope. But replanting is definitely a good option as well.
Felix asked, "What's a good reason to start from scratch?" And I'll give an example of this, and I'll let you add in some things. I just visited a property where the forest was almost entirely a beech forest, which is fine. I like beeches; they put out nuts a little inconsistently, but they do put out nuts that squirrels and other wildlife will eat. But I think what had happened is the previous logger had come through and taken out all the oaks and maybe some more of the desirables, and sort of left behind what was shade tolerant, which was probably 4 to 6 inch beech trees, and those ended up growing into the main forest canopy. So it had a very shaded, very little understory. Again, just less diversity. If you want to think about more diversity of trees, providing more opportunities for different types of wildlife, different types of nuts, acorns, different types of mast will produce more in different years. So having multiple tree species will provide a variety of different food sources at different times through the year. So sometimes that's one of those things where starting over you might get a more diverse forest because of that restart, I guess I would say. But I'll let you, that's one example. But Chase, did you want to add anything?
You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, like a lot of like different oak species, they evolve to like red oaks, white oaks. There's 100 different kinds, but they've evolved to like release or produce more acorns in certain years on like kind of a rotation to kind of help control like squirrel populations and stuff like that. So your different mass producers are going to grow different year or differently in certain years or produce more nuts. Like he said, beech was a lot more inconsistent. Oaks might be like every other year, one really good year, then 3 years later, or a couple of years down the line, it's like not producing as much for you. That's why it's good to have diversity, not only for like mass production, but also consider like what happened to like the American chestnut, right? Or any kind of those trees. Like who knows, like any day now, a disease could come and just wipe out a lot of our hard mass producers. And then we're kind of like SOL, really. Because American chestnut is like the main example I think of, obviously, but diversity is always good. I typically manage for at least like 5 different species if you can, hard mass produce or different kinds of like overstory trees, like different, like a red oak, a white oak, maybe hickories if you can grow them there. Beech get a bad rap, but they are a good nut producer. They're not like typically aren't the prettiest tree, and they don't grow super tall and straight, but they can be very valuable as far as like producing wildlife food. Just keep that in mind. Diversity is always better. You really don't want to have, I guess, as pretty as a picturesque white oak stand would be, as far not only for timber and for wildlife value. Like I said, a disease could come through and kill them all, and then you're kind of stuck with nothing really. Diversity is always good, and just keep that in mind. And I think the start of that question was, can you go back to the start of that question?
Good to start from scratch.
Yes. Okay. I kind of went off on a tangent. I'm sorry. But to start from scratch, like oaks, they're most often not going to be very shade tolerant. Like Luke said, like some are okay with moderate shade, but a lot of them need like pretty good canopy openings to kind of be fully dominant eventually. So if you have a stand where it's super crowded and there's really not any valuable species anyway, I mean, it's very unlikely that like a little sapling or like from an acorn to a sapling of a red oak will make it to maturity and be successful. So in that case, you might just want to start from scratch. The size is going to depend too. So you don't need to clear cut your whole forest necessarily. You might just clear cut 5 acres and then see what happens. Start small and experiment with it, and then obviously work under the guidance of your forester. But that might be a good place to start if you have kind of a stand that doesn't have a whole lot of desired stock in it. Because you see that a lot, especially old high grades, where what came up was just junk. And if you're lucky, you'll have poplar there, and that's good timber. But really, poplar will stump sprout and grow super quick and be valuable for you. But as far as wildlife goes, I mean, it really doesn't serve super beneficial. I hate to just keep hounding on like oak hickory management, but it's the best as far as wildlife goes, and it's also good for timber. So I'll keep beating to the ground until keep saying it till my face is blue. But it's just how it is.
Yeah. Another way I think about it too, Felix, is I was touring a property with a forester, and he said by doing partial cuts, we're really managing for a future shade tolerant forest. And so in his case, he says we're going to get maple, um, sort of maple, maybe beech forest as a result, and we will lose the less shade tolerant species. So that was very eye opening to me to think about. By doing thinnings, we're really creating the future forest by what the shade will or will not allowed on the stand. So, and there's a variety of different shade tolerances, and your soil type, as you mentioned, the soil types can influence how well things will regenerate in different levels of sunlight. So, great, that was a good talk through that. Bob had a good one, and this is one that I think is a $1 million question. What are the relative values of timber these days? For instance, poplar has been more valuable than maple or even cherry in some cases, while it used to be of lesser value. I'm facing this on a property we're working on trying to get timber harvest on, where we have a lot of loblolly pine. And I will introduce this by saying a lot of this depends on your distance from mills and how far your mill is and what type of wood it will take. And if you have to truck it a long way, it soon becomes uneconomical to be able to take that particular type of timber. So if you have softwood or hardwoods and you have mills that specialize on one or the other, that could definitely be a factor in the value that wood has. But Chase, do you want to add anything else? I don't have a good sense on the differences between, say, an oak and poplar or maples or beech. So anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This is where we'd be good to have a consultant forester on the line to kind of talk about timber sales and stuff like that, and like what's hot and what's not at the moment. But it varies a lot. I know like white oak has been consistently a very good timber tree forever, and I think it probably always will be. But the markets vary so much, and I'm not in the business of buying and selling timber, so I just hearsay from different colleagues in the industry. I'm talking to different consultant foresters. Like I'll talk to one guy and he'll tell me one thing, and then 6 months later it's something completely different because the timber market's kind of bottom out and come back. Like I think like last year poplar kind of taken a dip a little bit and then it rebounded a bit. From all I hear, like the pine market is pretty bad for saw timber and pulpwood. It's just not, for whatever, like it's just not good. I know like a lot of pulpwood is grown from the warmer areas of the world, so like they can grow pulpwood twice as fast as we do here in the States. So it's hard to compete with that in our markets. Like Luke said, like they're really in Maryland. I mean, if you're cutting timber, especially in Southern Maryland, it's either got to go up to Pennsylvania or it's going down to Virginia. And if it's not really valuable timber from the start, I mean, is it even worth trucking down there? How much are they actually getting at the mill for each log? So it's got to be, really worth their while to cut it. And it just, unfortunately, it leaves a lot of incentive to do high grades and stuff and in Maryland and other parts of the country. But it's unfortunate. Like, timber markets aren't the most consistent all the time for a lot of different factors. But it would be really nice if there was more sawmills in Maryland. I know Allegheny closed like 2 years ago or whatever it was, and that was a big hit on Western Maryland. But like Luke alluded to, like I said, a lot of stuff on property has to go more often than not out of state. So that's going to depreciate the value of it just from getting it there. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And we're going a little bit over, but these questions are good. Are you okay to keep going, Chase? And
Yep.
Audience, we'll be recording all this. We'll share it up on YouTube. This is really good. I'm noticing 12 new messages coming in on the chat, so we're going to get through as much as we can here. So let's keep rolling. Tom asked a great question. How do you manage water and runoff management or erosion issues post clear cut?
So clear cuts, I would only do them in flat areas and definitely don't pull the stumps. If you can do a clear cut or a small clear cut on a slope, I would tend to not do it. Like I live in Calvert here, so Calvert, Luke, as you know, I'm sure it's all kinds. It's like little Appalachia. I would tend to avoid doing clear cuts on a slope. If it's a flatter area, then absolutely. if there's no risk for like super bad erosion issues, but just keep the stumps in the ground. That's your best bet. They'll eventually, obviously, they'll decay, but hopefully by the time they fully decay, you'll have your new regen in there, establishing enough root matter to kind of keep the soil in place. So just be mindful where you do your clear cuts, and also don't pull stumps up. And also, if you start pulling stumps up too, that's basically a land clearing. So for like agricultural assessment for woodland, that might get a little dicey too. Like the county tax office might not look at that as forestry anymore. It might just be, cleared land. They might think you're building a structure there. So not only just for erosion issues, but just for your own benefit as far as like tax assessment goes. If you're someone with a bunch of woodland and you're getting agricultural tax assessed on it, that's something to keep in mind as well. So overall, I would just, general rule of thumb, keep the stumps if you can.
And I will say after a clear cut, you get very quick regen into the herbaceous layer like grasses, forbs, and oftentimes some really cool things start popping into these forests that rare plants even, or other things that are pretty exciting for a lot of botanists to come in afterwards when that sunlight starts to come back to the forest floor. So that herbaceous matter will also help to quickly come in there. But yeah, I think flat surfaces are good as a general rule. Jane asked about, the issue of invasives, and you covered this a bit. These disturbances might encourage some invasives coming in. So how do you manage them? And does the increase in management time, how does management time compare versus leaving the forest alone versus timber harvest?
This is where like I get stuck sometimes. It depends on like the landowner I'm working with, like how involved they want to be with management. Like if they have a heavy invasive present, but they also want to do like maybe a timber harvest or something. In some cases, the shade can help you. It can kind of shade out some invasives. I mean, it does create like a stagnant system, but it just depends on, if you pick your poison. Is it better just to have a stagnant, overstocked forest, or is it better just to let your invasives go run rampant? Hopefully, you're the landowner you're working with, or if you are a landowner, you're going to want to like tackle everything because you kind of need to in a lot of cases. And the invasive is going to vary, obviously. Definitely I would work with extension, if not your forester as well, all together to kind of see like how bad it is, if it's something you can pull by hand, or if it's stuff you need to do like large scale herbicide application. Sometimes prescribed fire helps for in the short term, but more often than not, it's going to need some herbicide application accompanied with like some brush hog equipment or whatnot. But
and I find it depends on the invasive too. That Japanese stiltgrass can be such a bear. I find it doesn't compete as well in full sun environments. Other grasses and forbs will kind of come in over it if it's sunny enough. Like that partial shade where it will really take off. So that's one of those. Again, probably depends on the species, and a lot of folks will also say, it's your invasives can also come in your mature forests as well. So I think it's a ongoing monitoring topic to be aware of. And we had Craig Harper come out here speak on our series a couple years ago, and he was mentioning, he's like, well, the practice you're going to go through, and you're going to take care of invasives right after a timber harvest. So this is just part of the standard operating procedures that you're going to want to do regardless. Okay. Will asks, is there a market for scrub trees? What can you do with holly? I would think maybe that is a pulpwood topic.
At best.
Bring a lot of value, but it's at least something maybe you can get it taken off for free or do you have any thoughts on holly?
I mean, some people are like super like tied to holly. Like I don't know if it's like a spiritual thing, but a lot of people, like, you start talking about cutting their hollies and they really don't want you to do it. I've had a couple landowners that really just like the aesthetic of holly. I think cardinals eat the berries. I'm not 100% sure. I've seen cardinals up in the branching before, but as far as holly goes, I mean, if you really want to, they do kind of shade out the understory a lot. If it's super thick with holly, a couple hollies an acre is not going to do you any harm. It's good, it's nesting cover, or some kind of cover habitat. But if it's really thick with holly, or even pawpaw, even can like really get really thick in there. You could cut it and then make big brush piles, wildlife brush piles. Or if you're a deer hunter, I mean, I used to hunt like at the base of a tree with holly branches all around me, and that's good cover. I don't know if that helps you at all, but use it to your advantage. If you have it, if you want to get rid of it, you can just cut it. You can, if you don't want it to like keep coming up, you can spray the stumps, but a little bit of holly is not going to hurt you. There definitely, like I said, there's definitely cases where the entire understory and midstory is holly, and that in that case, you probably want to thin it out a little bit, but just have the diversity is good. It serves the same purpose as a like a dogwood or a red bud, you know. So it weren't like a pretty different looking tree in your understory. So,
and it's an evergreen, so it gives you that some winter cover for animals to hide under. So, but yeah, it might not be a whole lot of value there, but you might be able to, if you, depending where you are, how close you are to mills, work with a forester, you can think about whether there's some market for it or not. Bob mentioned autumn olive, Bradford pear, both nasty invasives that I think that hack and squirt method you mentioned earlier, herbicides, really helps to save you a lot of time in coming back, because I know certainly Bradford pear resprouts years and years. Despite defoliation repeatedly, it will continue to resprout for several years. So I think an application of herbicide on that cut stump will help, or a hack and squirt treatment will help nip it in the bud, so you don't have to come back to it and deal with it again.
I mean, like when I was looking at my presentation this morning, I missed a lot of the key ones. I was kind of doing the invasives portion, just hitting some high notes in some of them, but I was kicking myself that I didn't include those too.
There's a lot of them, so
yeah, and people are still planting Bradford pears as ornamentals, so you're fighting that battle as well. So,
right. Jeremy mentioned plug the Habitat University podcast. Definitely love them. I listen to them sometimes myself. So yeah, that's a great link. Thank you for sharing. Are you aware of a program in Prince George's County to increase overall tree canopy that installs trees on county land and offers homeowners certain tree species for residential plantings? FTAP or KC Trees?
I've heard briefly about it, but I'm honestly pretty ignorant to it. I've definitely worked with landowners who have mentioned it, and I've been like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm going to brush up on that. But I'm sorry, I don't have a lot more information on the PG programs. I'll try to.
In general, though, there are a lot of programs for tree planting. So the 5 Million Tree Initiative has a lot of efforts to get trees in the ground. So yeah, that's another program to look into if you're looking to plant trees and do afforestation.
Yeah, the state has a ton of them, so just reach out to your state forester.
Yeah, and I will say that the state nursery also has trees for sale at a great price. I don't think you can find them on the private market that cheap. They do sell out, so get in there early and reserve your tree cuttings or tree plant seedlings there as another source. All right, Calvert County Planning and Zoning has funding for trees and private lands, a coupon program, and 2 grant opportunities. Thank you, Colleen. Helped answer that for Stacy. Jafar, in private lands, don't you need a permit to cut trees?
Yeah, so for like a traditional timber harvest, you need, I mean, if you do it the right way, you go through a consultant forester and they'll do like a sediment erosion control plan. They'll write a harvest plan and go through all the county permits with the county soil conservation district. I'm sure there's a lot that happens, you know, kind of off the books, but typically, yes, you do need a timber harvest permit. And if you hire a consultant forester, they'll handle all that for you. They're like your kind of like, they get 10% of the cut usually, but it's I couldn't recommend doing it more that way. They do a little more, obviously it's gonna be a little more sustainable, and they take a lot of headache from you. So definitely use a private consultant forester from the page that Luke showed earlier.
Forest management plan also, like the permits, there's probably a few different permits, but the forest management plan also sets you up to then get those permits. So oftentimes there might be forests, like maintaining forests on like a conservation easement means following the forest management plan, which could include timber harvest in the forest, knowing that it is a regenerating process and will become a forest again. So a lot of times when we think of like a timber harvest as meaning it's no longer forest, actually a lot of I think in terms of land use, we think of it as just a very, very young forest that is regenerating into an older forest. So that's another thing like to mention to people.
Yeah, so don't pull. That's why I go back to like, when you start pulling stumps up, that's where you run into some issues.
Yeah.
Because then you're taking the potential away for regeneration at that point. So.
Right. Joel shared a rain garden program. Thank you. Need to leave. Thank you, Tom. Can trees be planted? I'm going to drop a link for survey to fill out a survey. If you wouldn't mind, anybody has to jump off because this might take a little bit longer. I'm seeing 19 more chat messages, so they keep coming through. I want to put a link to fill out a survey. Would love to get your feedback on this. We like to report our impact to other people and to get new ideas for the future. So feel free to fill that survey out. Can trees be planted over an underground pipeline where the land was cleared to install the pipeline through the interior of the woodland? That's probably probably depends on the easement associated with that pipeline. Yeah. I don't know if you've experienced this before, Chase, but
that's sounds like a very specific example. That would be one definitely to consult the easement. The easements are, depending on when they're written, they're either very, very specific or very, very vague. So definitely, go to your county like soil conservation district if they're hosting the easements and have someone interpret that better for you. But I haven't ran into that issue or that situation myself, but it sounds like a very complex one, we'll say. So sorry, I don't have a better answer than that, but
I could see possibly there being some reluctance to do that because of the issues with roots going into the pipeline and interfering.
Yeah.
Things like that. I know that can be an issue in septic fields and things like that. So, but Bob said he clear cut 25 acres out in Garrett County on a pretty steep slope. They kept the stumps. 3 years after harvest, they have no erosion issues. Mentioned that the harvester did a good job installing water bars and water breaks to control any runoff. So I think some of those runoff issues can be very site specific and can be managed during that time. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing, Bob. Joel mentioned Garmin Brothers Sawmills in Crownsville. There are Amish sawmills around Mechanicsville, so they're not on the internet, but they're out there. So that's good to know about.
Those small scale ones are great. If you know those guys, like Stolfus Mill, like I said, Mechanicsville, they're right by my parents, and those guys are awesome. So there are others very small markets for those. Unfortunately, there's not the big ones, the big players. But those guys can only take so much saw timber, so just keep that in mind. But those are very, very important to our forest economy or our timber economy in Maryland. So without those, we really wouldn't have an industry, honestly. So
Bob mentioned his follow-up. He did herbicide after follow-up. After a harvest, before the harvest, he did herbicide, and he's still doing following up against spirea and multiflora rose. And I will say multiflora rose is not too hard to kill with herbicide if it's not too big. Oftentimes you can hack it down or mow it down, and then when it regenerates, then spray. It's a more manageable bush to spray the resprout. But I found crossbow herbicide to be very effective. It killed it very quickly. And so that's something I've had success with, Bob. Stacy, a non-credit General Forestry course offered through University of Maryland Extension starts in August and runs through December. It's self-paced, online, open to residents for $150. Thanks for the plug, Stacy. That is my colleague, Daniel Pratson. He's a new forester in Extension that's joining on. I'm going to have him on here in a few months here. But thanks for sharing that, Stacy. And that is online. You can find it real quick. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. Colleen, there's also a forest conservation exemption for commercial timber harvest permits, usually done by your consultant forester as well. Great to know about. So, boy, we covered a lot. Went 23 minutes over with Q&A. That was great, though. I love to see all the questions coming through. It was a lively one, Chase. So that's a good topic that you're in. And thank you everybody for staying on who stayed on this far. Chase, round of applause. Nobody can hear everybody clapping, but I'm sure there's a lot of people I'm seeing in the chat, a lot of thank yous, and really appreciate you coming on. Any closing things you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, I said, work with your forester, work with Extension. Luke, thank you for having me. Hopefully kind of, scratch the surface with all this stuff, but it's very complex. So just work with your forester and get after it. Thank you again, Luke, and thanks everyone for taking the time today, and hope everyone stays dry the rest of the evening.
All right, y'all take care. Have a good one.
Right, take care.